Coming up on this Tuesday edition of Newsline at noon, the World Health Organization declares Nigeria free of Ebola as supplies to take on the deadly virus arrive in the three hardest-hit West African nations. Apple closes out the fiscal year 2014, reporting fourth quarter revenue of $42.1 billion and net profits of $8.5 billion, smashing industry forecasts. Plus, IT policymakers at the ITU conference in Korea's port city of Busan discussed plans to roll out commercialized next-generation wireless technology. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Tuesday, October 21st here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in live from Seoul. I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. We begin today with some new hope in the fight against Ebola. Vital supplies have now been sent to West Africa, and Nigeria, a very populous country in West Africa, has now been declared Ebola-free.
Right, and over in the U.S., more than 36 people on the watch list have been cleared of infection after not showing symptoms for over 3 weeks. Connie Lee has more.
Key supplies have been sent to West Africa in the fight against Ebola. Ghana's President John Mahama told the BBC that fresh resources have begun to arrive in Guinea, Sierra Leone and Liberia, the three worst-hit West African countries. According to Mahama, the list of resources includes emergency food from the UN's World Food Program and more protective clothing. Supplies such as body bags, goggles, and face masks have been in short supply in these countries. This comes as the World Health Organization declared that Nigeria is one more country that is now officially Ebola-free.
Nigeria is now free of Ebola virus transmission.
Just last week, Senegal also declared it was free of the virus.
This is a spectacular success story that shows to the world that Ebola can be contained. But we must be clear that we only won a battle. The war will only end when West Africa is also declared free of Ebola.
In other hopeful news, 43 people in the U.S. who came into contact with Ebola victim Thomas Duncan have now been officially cleared of the virus after not demonstrating any symptoms during a 21-day monitoring period. In Spain, a nurse who had contracted Ebola is also free of the virus. But apart from the good news, more than 4,500 people have already died from Ebola, and the virus is still rampant in parts of West Africa. Connie Lee, Arirang News.
And Korea will join global efforts to further contain the deadly virus by sending the first group of medics to West Africa sometime in November. Korea's Foreign, Defense and Health Ministry said at a joint briefing on Monday several medical workers will be dispatched to 2 West African nations, most likely Liberia and Sierra Leone, as an advance team to review safety plans for dispatching future medical teams. Now, the future medical teams will be recruited via the internet, and about 10 people will be selected based on their expertise. They're expected to spend about 2 to 3 months there. Now, the decision is sparking controversy here in Korea, with opposition parties and some in the medical community expressing concern that Korea is not fully prepared to treat the deadly disease. And in other news, 9 days have passed since South Korea asked North Korea if it wanted to hold high-level talks on October 30th, but Pyongyang has yet to give its response to the proposal. And making matters worse, North Korea says it wants the South to stop provoking them, or they will have no choice but to retaliate. Kwon So-ah has the details.
Still no word from Pyongyang. While South Korea awaits a positive response to its proposal to hold high-level political talks next Thursday, the only uttering out of Pyongyang was a warning on Monday that it would retaliate if Seoul continues with what it calls provocations. North Korea was referring to an incident on Sunday when the two Koreas traded fire after 10 North Korean soldiers were seen approaching the military demarcation line near the border city of Paju. The North also stressed it would maintain its patrols along the border in the future. Heightened military tensions have cast a dark cloud over prospects the talks will go ahead as planned. Experts believe North Korea's hostile behavior following a recent visit by a high-level North Korean delegation is a calculated move. They say the regime wants to put itself in a better position for talks. Pyongyang is expected to ask the South to lift sanctions, provide economic support, and take steps to stop South Korean activists from flying anti-Pyongyang leaflets across the border. Sunday's shootout came a little over a week after North Korea fired at balloons carrying the leaflets. Tensions are likely to spike even more later this week as the activists say they plan to fly more balloons across the border. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
South Korea's Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-chae and Defense Minister Han Min-gu will head to the United States on Wednesday to attend the two countries' joint foreign and defense ministers meeting. Seoul's foreign ministry says the so-called 2+2 talks will be held in Washington on Thursday local time. Meeting with their U.S. counterparts, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel, the two sides are expected to cover a range of issues, including North Korea's nuclear program and measures to strengthen South Korea-U.S. alliance. Prior to this, they will hold their annual security consultative meeting and will likely discuss the timing of the transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul.
North Korean affairs are expected to top the agenda when President Park Geun-hye meets with a former top Chinese diplomat later on this Tuesday afternoon. Tang Jia-xuan, a former state councillor, is on a 5-day visit to Seoul to attend a Korea-China Leaders Forum. President Park has met with Tang on several occasions to discuss issues mainly related to Pyongyang's nuclear program. Tang is an expert on the Korean Peninsula, having dealt with Korea-China affairs while serving in top posts in China's foreign ministry through 2008. He's known to have played a crucial role when South Korea and China established diplomatic relations back in 1992. Representatives from South Korea's ruling and opposition parties met on this Tuesday for discussions on 3 bills related to April's ferry disaster. Ruling Saenuri Party floor leader Lee Gu met with his New Politics Alliance for Democracy counterpart Woo Yoon-gun, and the two discussed the details of a pending Seoul ferry bill, emphasizing that the bill should be passed by the end of this month. The two parties have launched a special task force on the 3 bills, which aim to end corruption between companies and government officials and to allow the government to go after illegally obtained assets. The two parties aim to pass the bills during a parliamentary session on Friday. Taking you to Busan now, and one of the major topics at the ongoing ITU conference taking place there is the next generation of mobile communications technology known as 5G. Now, if you thought your 4G or your broadband connection was super fast, then you haven't seen anything yet. Our Song Ji-sun filed this report from Busan.
In a little over 5 years' time, when 5G technologies are fully commercialized, people will be able to download a high-definition movie in less than 1 second. The 5th generation of mobile communications technology is several hundred times faster than its predecessor LTE, as the giga-level data rate is now a reality.
In the early years of 2020, will feature approximately 6 gigabits per second peak data rate and may eventually reach up to tens of gigabits per second. However, what is more important than the peak data rate, we think, is the minimum data rate experienced by the users.
That threshold will be maintaining a minimum data rate of 1 gigabyte per second. But Samsung recently succeeded in establishing a 1.2 gigabyte per second data rate on a vehicle that was traveling at 100 kilometers an hour. So we're inching closer to realizing the next generation of mobile technology, something that will connect all individuals and things, also known as Internet of Things.
When 5G technologies launch in 2020, everyone will be connected. Every object will be connected to each other, and objects and individuals will be connected. It will be an ultra-connected world, which will mark the beginning of an entirely different paradigm for ICTs.
The Korean government aims to test its 5G technologies at the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games. Seoul says the sporting event will be a global testbed for the technology we can expect to see in the post-2020 era. 송지선, Arirang News, Busan.
Time now for a look through some of the global headlines we're following this hour with Eunice Kim standing by for us at the News Centre with the latest developments.
Right. Eunice, let's start in Hong Kong. The much anticipated talks between government officials and pro-democracy leaders will take place later today in the evening.
Right, and ahead of the televised dialogue, the territory's high court granted injunctions to disperse protesters in parts of the city, which Hong Kong police say is at a dangerous point. Kim Min-ji reports.
Hong Kong police say the prospect for further clashes is growing in the Mong Kok district as pro-democracy protesters refuse to heed court injunctions to clear parts of the city.
The situation in Mong Kok is spinning out of control and on the verge of turning into a riot. I appeal to the protesters in the unlawful assembly, especially to students, for the sake of your personal safety and public order, stay away from the dangerous areas in Mong Kok.
The temporary orders by the territory's high court affect the roads in the districts of Mong Kok and Admiralty. The injunctions were granted Monday to local taxi associations, a bus company, and later to an investment company. All argued the demonstrations had lasted too long and were proving to be a public nuisance. Student leaders left it up to the individual to decide whether to stay or leave. Although the crowds have thinned, tensions soared over the weekend after Hong Kong's Beijing-backed leader C.Y. Leung accused the movement of containing, quote, external forces. Meanwhile, long-awaited televised talks between student representatives and government officials are set to begin at 6 p.m. local time Tuesday. However, expectations are low for a breakthrough. Earlier, Leung told foreign media that universal suffrage was unacceptable, in part because it risked populism driven by the voices of the poor and the working class. The embattled leader also warned protesters not to test China's patience, adding that Hong Kong was lucky that Beijing had not yet intervened in the standoff. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Turning next to the Middle East, where fierce fighting has reignited north of Kobani, the site of a month-long battle for control between Kurds and Islamic State fighters. The area had seen 2 days of relative calm, leading Kurdish fighters to wonder if IS militants there had been pushed back to the fringes of the city. But loud explosions, small arms fire, and coalition airstrikes were heard as night fell on Monday. This as the Turkish government announced in an unprecedented move it would grant Kurds on its side of the border safe passage to join the fight in Syria. This marks a 180-degree change from Ankara's previous stance. The development comes as the U.S. confirmed it airdropped weapons and medical supplies for the Peshmerga forces battling the Sunni extremists rampaging through Syria and Iraq. Indonesia has sworn in its newest leader, Joko Widodo, ushering in a new chapter for the world's third largest democracy. The man who grew up in the slums of Java took his oath as the nation's 7th president on Monday in front of members of parliament as well as top foreign delegates, including U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott. The 53-year-old is the first Indonesian president to not come from a military or political elite background. Following his narrow victory in July, the former furniture salesman turned Jakarta governor told his audience it was time to realize an Indonesia that has political sovereignty, economic independence, and cultural character. For all the optimism surrounding his inauguration, political watchers say enormous challenges await Widodo in his 5-year term, including fierce opposition in parliament against his economic and political reform drives. Now, Washington is under fire after a report found that the U.S. government had paid out millions of dollars in Social Security to dozens of suspected Nazi war criminals forced out of the country. A senior House Democrat is demanding an investigation after the Associated Press reported that a legal loophole had allowed the payments funneled using taxpayer money. The U.S. Justice Department explained benefits are paid to those who had first renounced their U.S. citizenship and left voluntarily. But Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney argues that using public resources to support outlaws for several years simply made little sense. And wrapping in the UK, Prince William and his wife Kate Middleton have announced they are expecting their second child April of next year, just in time for their 4th wedding anniversary. The two were married on April 29, 2011. Kensington Palace also announced that the Duchess of Cambridge was getting better after a severe bout of morning sickness had forced her to cancel several engagements. So far, no word yet on the gender of Prince George's younger sibling.
Stay up to date on the latest news out of Korea. Connecting to our team of reporters about the issues that matter to Korea. On air, on your mobile, online. Find out more about Korea on NEWSLINE at Noon with Mark Broome and Eoh Jin-joo.
I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
Market researcher, strategy analytics, said Thursday that LG Electronics brought in about...
Beating Wall Street forecast, Apple has announced record figures for its fiscal 4th quarter, which ended on September 27th. Now, sales of its signature iPhone and iMac computers have pushed the company's revenue and profit up. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
Apple's 4th quarter earnings have smashed expectations on the back of strong iPhone sales. The company posted $42.1 billion in sales and a net profit of $8.5 billion. Apple sold 39.3 million iPhones in the quarter, the first that the new iPhone 6 and iPhone 6 Plus were on sale. That's well above what analysts were expecting and 16% higher than the same period last year. Apple's $1.42 per share profit also exceeded analysts' prediction of $1.31 per share. Apple sold a record 5.5 million iMac computers, up more than 20% from the same quarter in 2013. The only black mark in an otherwise glowing report was its flagging iPad line. iPad sales were down 13% from the previous year for a 3rd successive quarter of decline. Sales of the iPhone, on the other hand, have steadily increased, even though smartphone sales have declined in developed markets such as the US and Europe. The larger screen iPhone 6 and 6 Plus got a strong reaction early on, with the company selling 10 million smartphones in the opening week, up 1 million from last year. Apple is expected to see a big jump in sales in the near future, as it teamed up with China Mobile last year, the largest carrier in the world, gaining access to around 800 million more subscribers. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Now, if you visited Seoul, you'll know it's almost impossible to walk a few hundred meters down the street before coming across a franchise coffee shop. So it really shouldn't come as a huge surprise to learn that the nation's coffee imports are forecast to hit a record high this year. Data released by the Korea Customs Service shows Korea's inbound shipments of coffee during the first 9 months of the year amounted to 99,000 tons, up 19% from a year earlier. The January to September figure has already surpassed the previous record for annual coffee imports set in 2011. Now, most coffee was imported from Vietnam, followed by Brazil, Colombia, and Honduras. Analysts say the growth is being driven by stronger consumer demand and a sharp increase in the number of coffee shops nationwide.
Now to some news that is sure to give any budding tech entrepreneurs out there a nice morale boost, because a tiny Korean company, we're talking really small, 3 workers are all at work there, have developed technology that the space agency NASA wants to take off their hands. Our Shin Se-min reports.
A small company of 3 has the technology that NASA wants. Kwang Technomagnet, based in Gyeonggi-do Province, has recently completed work on the world's first permanent magnet controlling technique. The technique creates a strong magnet that draws objects weighing dozens of tons within just 0.3 seconds using only 10 amps.
This is an original green technology that will help fuse dozens of tons of objects without the help of a current in less than a second.
The company has already acquired 13 patents for the technique, and a global patent is pending. By adopting the technique, NASA thinks its astronauts will no longer have to dock a spacecraft manually, but will be able to do it automatically. The technique is also expected to solve the issue of bolt damage, with magnetic force diminishing the risk of explosion, and the Korean firm and NASA will soon conduct a verification test. The company was able to export the technique thanks to support from Gyeonggi-do Province through a program of the University of Texas.
We educate domestic companies in collaboration with companies outside of Korea and eventually help the domestic companies enter the global market.
15 domestic SMEs have been selected for the program sponsored by Gyeonggi-do Province and the University of Texas, which has a budget of $1.4 million. The program has supported 81 companies over the past 6 years, generating over $41 million. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
The World Health Organization is warning that worldwide cancer cases are growing at an alarming rate and urgent action is needed to prevent a crisis. The WHO says healthy behaviors could prevent a lot of cancer deaths each year. So it's released a list of guidelines that we should all try and follow. Our Connie Kim reports.
The World Health Organization has rolled out a dozen health tips to help reduce the risk of cancer by half. Experts at the WHO's International Agency for Research on Cancer say the recommendations allow people to change their behavior on an individual level. At the top of the list, do not smoke, do not use any form of tobacco, have a smoke-free home and workplace. Smoking is a main culprit that kills 6 million people annually and an additional 600,000 from secondhand smoke. The harmful habit is also blamed as the biggest cause of premature death from chronic conditions such as heart disease, stroke, and high blood pressure. New tips on the list urge people to look for potential exposure to radiation at home and to actively reduce high radon levels. Bowel, breast, and cervical cancer screening tests were also suggested. For females in particular, it recommended breastfeeding, limiting the use of hormone replacement therapy, and HPV vaccinations for girls. The 12-point code also stressed the importance of avoiding alcohol, excessive sun exposure, and maintaining a healthy diet. The WHO's Specialized Cancer Agency says it hopes the new code will help individuals to take concrete action for themselves, friends and family in order to significantly cut down the risks of developing cancer. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. The showers have picked up overnight and it's still raining in the central parts of the nation, including here in Seoul. So we'll see about 5 to 20 millimeters of rain today, while some areas in the south could see up to 120 millimeters, and that rain could be accompanied by thunder and lightning, also strong gusty winds. And the afternoon highs will be similar to yesterday, but there will be only about 2 to 3 degrees of gap between the lows and highs. So let's take a closer look at those temperatures. Now the daily highs in the capital will only make it to 16, while Gwangju and Busan will peak at 21 this afternoon. Now for other regions, down on Jeju Island and Daejeon should see highs of 24 and 17, while Dokdo peaks at 16. Well, today's rain will go away late in the evening for here in the capital, and we'll have our beautiful autumn weather back tomorrow here in Seoul. But notice that we'll have a chilly morning lows, so be sure to dress accordingly to stay warm. Well, that's all for Korea, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that just about does it for this Tuesday edition of Newsline at Noon.
Mark and I'll be back at the same time tomorrow. Thank you for watching.